Commission. Could you call the roll, please?
Mr. Pearson?
Here.
Dr. Havenfeller?
Yes.
Mr. Dowdy?
Here.
Mr. Kelly?
Here.
Mr. Iwan?
Here.
Ms. Kay?
Here.
Ms. Hennessy?
Here.
Thank you. It's been suggested that I make a commentary about last month's meeting at this point, but I will defer until the commissioner comments in the agenda as we have it published today.
We can't hear you, Fred.
I'm sorry about that. The first item on the agenda is the approval of minutes from the July 6th meeting. Could I have a motion regarding those minutes?
So moved.
And a second?
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Are there any changes, comments, concerns with the minutes?
I have one on top of page 2, item 4, the next to last line, the penultimate line, last word, Mr. Capelli, and I think the word seconded has been left out.
Yep.
Okay.
No other comments.
Any other comments on the minutes? Hearing none, I'll call the question. All those in favor of accepting the minutes with the change of Mr. Capelli seconding the motion, say aye. Aye. Opposed? Thank you. We are using the updated agenda that John published, which was FOIA'd. Item 4, presentation on the Marsh Management Plan update. John?
So I wanted to provide the Planning Commission with just a status update of where we are with the Marsh Management Plan. As you all are aware, last month in July, we had our charrette with the morning portion of that with dedicated stakeholders on the island, visiting guests, experts. And so that was really a robust engagement session that morning. The afternoon was a little lackluster as far as attendance from the general public during the drop-in session, but felt it's still important to kind of provide the full commission with a status update of where we are with the Marsh Management Plan. So Nicole has graciously joined us today to provide that update.
Good afternoon. So my name is Nicole Elko. I am one of the team members that you all have hired to help with the comprehensive marsh management plan. As you can see on the slide here, I'm working with Biohabitats, and many of you met Keith Bowers, who's the president of that company, during the charrette last month. So wanted to just let you know a little bit about kind of who we are, what we're doing, and provide you with an update. I've actually been doing beach management for most of my career. I started managing beach nourishment projects in Florida in the late 90s, started my business in 2007 and moved to South Carolina at that time. Continued working on beaches, local comprehensive beach management plans, surveys, dune restoration, beach nourishment, because that's what beachfront communities wanted to do. That was their most important asset. And it's just been in the last 5 to 7 years that communities like you and other beachfront communities have realized that our beaches are in pretty good shape and there's water coming up on the backside of our islands now. So marsh management has been something we've been focusing more on, and that real shift from focusing solely kind of on beach management to this more comprehensive coastal preservation, thinking about sea level rise is a really proactive thing that you all are doing here on Kiowa. You're far ahead of the curve as it relates to other beachfront communities. So congratulations on that, and I'll just give you a quick update of where we are kind of with this plan. So your RFP that was issued earlier this year kind of laid out these objectives, and this is what we aim to do with the comprehensive marsh management plan. I won't read them all, but essentially gaining a better understanding of why the marsh is important, looking at different methods of protection to manage that interface between the marsh and the, quote, highlands of the island, And then develop recommendations to guide the planning as we move forward. That might include encouraging or establishing new development practices, ordinances, recommending capital improvement projects, all with the goal of enhancing the quality of life and sustaining that critical resource for future generations. We are very aware that the town of Kiowa is not the only player on the island, so we've been well versed in the maze of Ks, and we have incorporated folks from all of the entities, so much so that we're actually thinking about what a marsh of Ks might look like, and sort of, we want to provide some guidance as to the roles and responsibilities of each of these different entities as they relate to the marsh. On the bottom corner there, under Michael's picture, it says, "Together we shine." That's the community piece. So the property owner, the human being is a really important entity here in the management of the marsh too. And there'll be a lot of educational recommendations of how we can bring in property owners and other community members on Kiowa to help with marsh management. As John mentioned, we conducted a planning charrette late last month on July 21st with the goal of co-developing preliminary actions, recommendations, and educational strategies for the plan. It was very successful. We had representation from each of the Kiowa entities, as well as experts from South Carolina Sea Grant, Clemson Extension, South Carolina DHEC OCRM, the National Estuarine Research Reserve. So a nice blend of local knowledge and outside expertise to really solicit some feedback on some of these conceptual ideas that we have for the plan. We identified some low-hanging ideas and immediate areas of concern. You can see the map there. That was one of the products where we were putting up sticky notes and sticker dots all over some things to kind of vote and come to some consensus on some of these preliminary action items and draft recommendations. We are still pulling all of that together, but just a little teaser for you here. This is a compilation of elements from the survey that was conducted online, the interactive map that some of you contributed to online, as well as the in-person feedback from the charrette. The pie chart shows that most people are extremely concerned about threats to Kiowa's marsh. And then the bar chart, I wonder if I can't minimize that. Yeah. There we go. So the bar chart shows the prioritized marsh management concerns. So what we have here is we've been talking a lot about everyone's different concerns as they relate to the marsh, and now we actually have them listed with property loss and marsh bank erosion as the #1 priority. And then as we go down the list to include the marsh's ability to sustain wildlife, stormwater runoff and drainage into the marsh. So what we aim to do is now develop our recommendations and the actions of the plan to address these concerns. So the next steps for us on the comprehensive marsh management plan will be to do that, develop this preliminary recommendation list to address the priority concerns that are listed here. The photos on the slide are taken from the Kiowa Conservancy's catalog of living shoreline approaches and green infrastructure elements for the island. And there are a lot of great suggestions in there that will probably make their way into the marsh management plan because they directly address some of the concerns. For example, natural and nature-based features along the marsh front, like planting vegetation, can address the concerns of property loss, of the ability to sustain fisheries, of the bulkheads, right? So if we can really bolster that natural buffer that we have along the marsh edge, we can address a lot of the concerns. We think about stormwater runoff and drainage into the marsh. We talked a lot during the charrette about incentivizing permeable surfaces, so that's also in there. So those are just 2 examples of some preliminary recommendations you can probably expect to see. Another one would be, we talked a lot about standardizing setbacks. Perhaps different parts of the island would have different standardizations based on the time frame of when they were initially developed, and that may include buffers and determining the allowable activities and types of vegetation within those setbacks. So that is where we are. The next step, once we pull together this list of preliminary recommendations and actions, will be to come back to you in the community again to get some more feedback on that list, to make sure we want to, continually engage the community throughout this process. And then once we've prioritized the list of actions and recommendations, those will be incorporated into a final marsh management plan for you by the end of the year.
Wonderful. Are there any questions or comments to Nicole?
One question for Nicole, with insider information. What is the status of the grant application?
We haven't heard back. It's been submitted, and no one who has submitted has heard anything yet, so we're all anxiously awaiting the results.
How hopeful are we?
We vary.
Okay,
Cautiously optimistic, shall we say.
thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. John, we're going to have a presentation on generator installations.
So I'm gonna Mike's gonna do one adjustment just to help with our sound, and after he does that,
Okay.
I'll introduce our guest.
Okay.
Just continuing with our meeting agenda, today we do have sort of a presentation regarding generator installations. Today, in advance of the agenda item for a proposed amendment to our setbacks section, I've invited two installers or companies rather to come and give the Planning Commission just some details, some background information regarding generators and what they see and experience on the island. So that gives you some familiarity with questions that may arise in making the decision for this recommendation. So today I have William and Eric from Moxie Power Systems and William from Charleston Electric. They'll just come and kind of talk and walk you through. I encourage you guys to ask as many questions as possible because they're sort of a wealth of knowledge. They were two representatives of our recent Board of Zoning Appeal applications that came before the Board of Zoning Appeals for a variance. And so after that meeting and preparing for a text amendment, I thought with them being experts in their lines of work, it'll be good for you guys to meet and engage with them. So Eric and William, if you guys want to.
Before you do that, on our screen right now is the next steps of the Marsh Management Plan, is what's showing up on the, okay, now I'm seeing people. Because I couldn't see all those slides during the Marsh Management Plan, so I want to make sure we see the appropriate slides.
Yeah, so there'll be no slides for the next set of presentations, but this will be just kind of a talk, but you'll be able to at least see the commissioners.
Okay.
If you guys want to just come up and.
How are y'all? I'm William, Charleston Electric.
Hey.
I'm filling in. My brother had to leave town, so I'm not as informed on this as I should be, but I feel like I could probably answer any questions you have about problems with setbacks and zoning and so forth for the island.
Do we have any questions? Did you say Michael?
William.
William?
Yes.
William, this is Michael. You can hear me?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So from my point of view, my concern is less about the setbacks. It's more about the noise emission.
Mm-hmm.
Therefore, choosing the best location for the generator to minimize the impact on neighbors.
Right.
and involving them somehow at least in that process. So could you first maybe talk a little bit about the noise emission from these state-of-the-art generators that you would install today?
Yeah, well, so there's different models of generators. So your standard models are air-cooled model. They're a lot smaller. They're typically 4 feet left to right by about 30 inches tall. Those are two-cylinder gas engines that run at 3,600 RPM. So what you trade there is size, the smaller size generator, but it's a louder generator. Then you have a liquid-cooled model. Liquid-cooled model is more of like a car where it has a radiator and it puts coolant through the block to cool the engine. Those run at typically 1,800 RPMs and are quite a bit quieter, but they're a larger footprint. So, the average liquid cooled starts at somewhere probably 6 to 7 feet long by 4 to 5 feet tall. And they have a lot more clearance factors that have to go around those generators. They have to be 5 feet off of a structure, whereas a air-cooled model that's a little noisier can be 12 to 18 inches off of a structure and then have a smaller footprint for an enclosure around it.
Okay. But again, could you talk a little bit about the noise emissions? So what, for example, dBA levels do we need to expect from these two different types of generators?
Well, the dBA is going to be, there's a lot of variables with the decibels. So what they list on the manufacturer's guides is in a controlled environment, where it's running at a certain percentage. The dBA, I'm not real familiar with decibels, but they typically sound like a lawnmower that's running when they're running. And a lot of it has to do with the enclosure that's built around the generator itself. So if you have a full enclosure around it, that's obviously going to block a lot of the noise from coming out. We'd see that typically a lot on the island where we have to build a full enclosure on all three sides of the generator. Sometimes depending on the home, sometimes we'll have to even do, cedar shake down the sides of it. And when you have those type of enclosures around it, they're definitely, it's going to be a quieter output. The Generac specs their generators from 21 feet from the intake side, somewhere like 73 decibels. I'm not a big decibel. I don't know exactly what that means. It sounds louder than what 73 decibels means to me, depending on where it's at and how hard it's running. And if if you're running it at 100%, the engine's going to run harder and so forth. So it's really a hard thing to judge without being a specialist in noise. I don't know anything about
Okay.
it.
I mean, hard to judge is not really the right wording because you just can measure it, and usually the manufacturers would actually provide that information because I think it's even a requirement to provide that information.
I can step in here. So the industry standard on
You're gonna have to.
You have to use the podium, sir. Thank you.
we should just stand together.
Sure.
Hello, Eric with Moxie Power here. So the industry standard with most systems between whether it's Generac, Kohler, which is a brand that we deal in, Cummins, some other brands, usually see somewhere between 63 and 67 decibels. Of course, that's measured when the generator is running at peak. And most of the time your generator is not going to run peak. So it's like getting in your car on the highway and smashing the gas down and revving up. It's going to be a lot louder than on a standard day sitting in traffic just cruising. So usually your generator is running at 25 to 50% capacity. So that 65 decibels average, you're not going to see that in day-to-day use, only when the generators are really maxed out.
But that's that's rated at distance too, though.
Yeah, I believe that's at 7 feet.
Is it 7 feet?
I believe it's 7 feet. I can actually may have a spec sheet.
Thought it was 21 for Generac.
And these generators still run like once a week just to test their functionality on an automatic mode, or?
Yes, we like to set them up, especially in the low country, where there's a lot of humidity in the air, for them to run once a week in order to get any condensation out of the oil that could build up from the humidity in the air.
Okay, and they run for like 30 minutes or?
5 minutes is what the standard is now for Generac.
Okay, good. Thank you.
Correct, that's at 23 feet is where it's measured.
So those decibel ratings were at 23 feet. So when you get that 65 to 70 decibels or whatever the range is, that is from 23 feet away from the intake side, I believe, of the generator, not the exhaust side of the generator.
Okay, so if we would assume like the average between the two numbers that the two of you provided, so let's say is 70 dBA, so that means it's about 10 times louder than a regular conversation. No, I'm stating a fact, it's not a question.
Yeah, no, yeah, if that's the truth, that's the truth.
Okay, thank you.
It's about on par as a riding lawnmower.
That's what I think they sound like. Yeah.
Staying on the point of noise, could you, just for comparative purposes, discuss the noise emitted from HVAC units when they start up, when they're running, as opposed to the generators when they start up and they're running?
You know, the generator will be fairly, a good bit louder than an air conditioning unit, unless there's something wrong with that AC.
Half as much as loud or twice as much? Or?
Probably, I mean, the best way I can make it out to is that if you go and you start up a riding lawnmower and you stand 10 feet away from it, that's about what the generator is going to sound like running. Probably double the.
And that would be for the entire 5 minutes of the testing?
For the testing.
And then when it's running, it stays at that level?
Yes, sir. Until the outage is over.
Is there a safety requirement in terms of positioning the generator adjacent to a home or a building site or facility?
There's a lot of regulations on where we can put it based upon window locations, operable windows, vents for dryers, air vents for exhaust fans. So we have to maintain proper distances away from things like that. And those distances can vary based upon the item. But typically, you're going to be 18 inches off of the house to the back side of the generator. And then the generator itself, you're going to have a 3-foot clearance on the left and the right of the generator. That's for airflow. And then, like I said, we have to position these to where that if it's on a platform or if it's on the ground, if there's a window right here, we got to position the generator to where it's 5 feet from the window. That way, if the window were to open or somebody left it cracked, if it was running, that carbon monoxide can't get into the home easily.
And that's regardless of whether or not they run on electricity or propane?
That's, yeah, whether they run on natural gas or propane or diesel, you still have to meet those requirements.
So the distance would be the same and all the other requirements for positioning would be the same?
Somewhat, because there are different types of generators out there and they have different, testing or manufacturers' testing procedures for them. But as I said, with like a big liquid cooled generator, they have larger not setbacks, but they have larger distances from the building and so forth for serviceability because they have to be serviced on both sides and so forth. A typical generator, though, is, your clearances are going to be 5 feet from windows and doors. You don't want to be over a big overhang of a house, that has a big awning or something over the side. But they're all going to have some type of thing of that nature.
What fuel type is used on Kiowa?
Typically propane. Yeah.
Okay.
We've seen an increase in the number of permits for the generators.
Yep.
Are you seeing a lot of the installations being in new construction or older homes or both?
We're probably seeing, we see primarily, well, we have a few builders that we do work with, but I think we see a lot for older homes more than the newer construction. We just don't deal with a lot of new construction ourselves, that's why.
Right.
Have you had any trouble with installations on new properties meeting the setback requirements
On the island here?
on the island?
Not that I know of. I know that they've had to go back on some projects and get things reevaluated because the builders, a lot of times, they don't realize that the clearances you have to have on the generator, they think you can just pop it in on a 4-foot area and it's fine. So we've had to go back and have some of these decks where the AC units are built on extended or built out further in order to meet the clearances of the generator. And that, like I said, that's primarily because the builder's not educated on the clearances for the generator.
So for new units, it's not a problem. For existing units or existing homes, it may be an issue?
Existing homes, we found out here on the Kiawah Island that a lot of generators that I've seen and have come across are not within they do not meet clearances properly, as the generator specs are currently. So what happens then is if we want to go and their generator died for whatever reason or met its life expectancy, they want to change it out, but we just can't go and pop that generator out and set a new one in because it doesn't meet our requirements. And then some of these homes out here, from what I understand, I don't know all of them, but a lot of them are built to close to their max lot size is what I understand. So when we're trying to replace a generator that doesn't meet those clearances, then we get into a problem of trying to find a new position and then having the lot size or the clearances that they need without getting some type of special review.
Mm-hmm.
That's a problem that I've always had down here. Because it is a difficult thing, because we gotta, first priority is the customer's safety. So I don't care, no matter what, if they want to put it right next to their bedroom window, and that's where they're going to put it, we're not going to do the project for them because we're not going to take anybody's life and put it in jeopardy. But when you get outside of that, sometimes it's really hard to find a location on some homes down here from what I've seen.
Any more questions for William or Eric? Thank you, gentlemen, for coming out today.
A question for me, so have you seen struggle in terms of choosing the location and considering the noise disturbance for the neighbors of the property where you installed it? Is this often a consideration, or is it just about, the setbacks and those distances to windows and vents?
I didn't hear the very beginning. I'm sorry.
Okay, so in the discussion about the right placement of these generators that you were talking about, is it really more about the setbacks and those distances from windows, etc., or does also noise emission to the neighbors play a role in these discussions?
Some customers will ask us, "Hey, look, is this going to be too loud for my neighbor?" And what I simply tell them is, I said, "Look, for 5 minutes once a week, the generator is going to run, but ultimately they're going to be doing lawn work. You're going to have some noise, and it's not that bad for 5 minutes. That's not, that's for the customer to work that out with their neighbor. As far as a long-term outage, from what I understand, is on Kiawah Island, a lot of times they'll disrupt the power down on the island and try to get people to evacuate, is what I've been told. And so, if they don't evacuate and their generator's running, obviously the neighbor would hear it if they stayed on their property. That's not something that we take a large position in, though, is the neighbors. That's not something that we necessarily do. We just try to fit it and put it to a space on their property that's safe for them and their family.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thanks.
Thank you, gentlemen.
I'd like to step in and answer some of the same questions, if you don't mind.
Oh, sure.
Specifically to what Michael was saying about the consideration of placement, our biggest concerns when considering placement of the generator are, number one is of course safety, like Michael was saying about 5 feet from a window, not being near any intake vents, being at flood height. That's the main concern. Secondary concern would be distance of electrical and gas runs. Obviously, the shorter the run is, the more convenient it is for the installer and the better value it is for the client. The third consideration, of course, is setbacks and meeting the town requirements for where we can physically put equipment on the property. As for noise, so like he was saying, the units will come on once a week or even twice a week. Usually when they actually test in a quiet mode, in a lower decibel mode. The Generac units get down to 50 decibels in a test mode. And almost every installation on Kiowa includes some kind of screening around the generator, which also will muffle the sound. Most projects on Kiowa require foliage and different plant installations to help mask the generator. That also will cover up a lot of the sound and absorb a lot of the sound. We do a lot of installs where we go inside with the customer and stand inside the house, and it's like, it's as loud as inside the house, it's as loud as the HVAC running. Some HVAC units get up to 50, 60 decibels when they start up. So it could be an HVAC unit in some cases. Most of the newer ones that are not as loud can be as loud as a generator. But again, the decibel measurements that are listed on the generator a lot of times are taken at maximum capacity. It's a comparison of running your vehicle, at 5,000 RPMs versus a cruising speed closer to 2,000 RPMs. So there's a lot of variables, but there's also a lot that goes into an installation that will muffle the sound. We're looking at a decibel chart here that says a normal conversation is 60 decibels, but it's akin to having somebody come and mow your yard. With the Kohler generator, the engine that goes in that unit is shared with a lot of commercial lawnmowers. So it's just like having your neighbor have their yard cut once a week. The noise level is about the same. Does that help understand a little bit more?
Yes, sir.
I'd also like to, they do have a quiet mode. We never set ours up in quiet mode, ever.
Yeah.
It's been proven to be not good for the generator. It's an EPA requirement that they have that, but it's not good to run the generators on it, so we will never set ours up in quiet.
Yeah, it causes a lot of follow-up calls. The units just aren't made to run it at the quiet mode. So a lot of times it is turned off.
Mm-hmm. Okay, great. I think that's great, you two. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Thanks very much.
Any other questions? Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you guys very much for your time. Appreciate it.
Thanks. Thanks for coming out. Item 5, old business. We have no old business to attend to. Item 6, new business. The proposed amendment to the 2022 rules of procedure for the Planning Commission.
I can still see just the decibel chart on my screen.
Yeah,
Could you change
we'll
that?
get rid of it. Okay,
And
thanks.
I can hardly hear the podium speaking.
I'm sorry about that. We have no old business, so we're going to go to the new business, which is the proposed amendment to the 2022 Rules of Procedure. Section 7 dealing with virtual meetings, which you three are doing today, and Section 8 dealing with executive session during a virtual meeting. If I could have a motion concerning these amendments, then we can discuss.
So moved.
It's been moved that we adopt these. Could I have a second? Okay, hearing no second, the motion fails. We'll go on to the next
I'm
business.
sorry, I cannot hear what was discussed. I can't even hear the question that was asked. So could you please adjust your microphone and help us here virtually?
Well,
to
I'm
really
sitting,
understand
Michael,
what's
I'm
going
right on top of the microphone. If you can't hear me, I don't know what to do. Mr. Dowdy has moved that we adopt the draft for section 7 and 8, virtual meetings and executive sessions, as submitted by the town's attorney. We need a second to discuss these two.
But I'm sorry, what is the proposal? John, could you help
So,
us?
right now, before the agenda is the amendment of the proposed rules of procedure. There's been a motion made by Mr. Dowdy that needs a second.
And what is the motion?
The motion is to approve as the outline language.
Okay.
Wait, as written, but after we second, we can make a couple of comments or changes, correct?
That's correct, Joanne. That's why we need a second before we can discuss.
Second.
Thank you very much. Michael.
I have one change, if I may.
Okay, Michael, can you hear us, sir? Can you hear us, Michael?
Hardly. A little better, but it's still difficult to follow the conversation. So my understanding now is we approve the motion to add section 7 and section 8 to the Town of Kiowa Island Planning Commission Rules of Procedure, correct?
Yeah. Can you hear me, Michael?
Yes, I can hear you very well.
Yeah, okay. If I may, Fred, I'll just say for Michael, yes, it was moved and seconded, and now I think we're at the point of discussion. And I just wanted to change in section 7, members attending virtually shall, change may to shall. That'd be consistent in the way section 8 is written also, but that should be shall, not may.
You mean shall be counted as present? Is that what you're saying?
Members attending virtually shall be able to vote on matters before the commission, not may be able to, shall be able to.
Oh, okay. A member shall attend a scheduled meeting virtually?
No, second, down here,
Second.
right here.
Number 7.
Oh, okay, I'm sorry. So it is the voting, virtually shall be able to vote. Yes, ma'am.
Yes.
Okay.
Fred, can I,
Can I, hold on a second.
go ahead.
But so you're changing the language here. So we need to vote, I mean, that's an amendment to the amendment. And so, so what she has done, she's moved just to, I know this sounds hyper-technical.
Oh, it is.
But this is how you're supposed to work with the ordinance language. She's made a motion to amend the language to change that may to shall. Is there a second for that amendment?
Second.
Thank you, Michael.
Thank you, Michael. Is there any further discussion on that change? Okay, so
now we take a vote on the
Correct.
change?
On the
Okay.
amendment.
Just on the amendment to the word virtually shall be able to vote.
yes.
Okay. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Thank you.
Okay. Now we can continue with the main amendment as amended. Discussion or further amendments?
Is there any more changes?
Fred, I have a comment.
Yes, Mr. Capelli.
With respect to this particular change, I'd like to just refer back to, well, at least 2018 or possibly even earlier, when the subject of what I would call absentee voting or voting by phone came about, and a discussion was held to changing the Planning Commission rules to accommodate that. And I was the one that addressed it and requested it. And the response at the time, which is still relevant and still very true, is that in Section 4, Article 2, our rules of conduct, our rules of order, suggests that Robert's rules apply. And we amended Robert's rules to be very clear that it was the current version, which was at that time the 10th or 11th issue, and now we're up to 12. But in any event, Robert's rules are very clear. There are 3 ways of being, quote, present, and if you're present, you're allowed to vote, according to the language. And the commission agreed at the time that because of that, no further amendment of the rules would be required to accommodate the change that we were making to allow members to vote by phone at the time. Robert's rules, as I said, the updated version, number 12, contains a full discussion of voting by absentees or teleconference, and there's 3 methods, all of which are discussed in total, and basically say the same thing, that if you're present, you can vote, and no planning commission rules needed to change because of that. I still think that's the right answer, although at the point I introduced it back in 2018, 17, whatever the year was, I felt it would be necessary. I was convinced otherwise. I still think that is the proper way, and I would suggest that we consider in this motion a further amendment, and that is to eliminate paragraph, if I get the right one, the first paragraph, the one we just changed, 7, and leave in 8. 8, I think, is important, and I do have a proposed word change in there as well, but I would propose a second amendment to the amended version to delete paragraph 7 in its entirety, considering that Article 3, Section 4, Rules of Order, accommodate the change that we're making in paragraph 7. And 7 is redundant. So I move that we strike paragraph 7 and consider that a second amendment to the draft that we're looking at.
Okay, Andy has suggested an amendment of deleting section 7, virtual meetings in its entirety. Is there a second for that motion? I hear none, so that fails. You then said, Andy, you had something about section 8, executive sessions.
Excuse me?
No.
Okay, go ahead, I'm sorry.
You had something about the second paragraph, Mr. Capelli?
I have no problems with the second paragraph, except that there's one word that I would suggest you consider changing, and that would require another amendment. But since you're not prone to making amendments, we'll suggest that. Actually, I'm going to jump over it. I have another proposal with respect to this recommendation, and I would like to table discussion of this issue to also consider at a future meeting the inclusion in the articles of the rules of procedure, a section dealing with the subject we talked about, the very important subject we talked about with respect to principles in serving and standards of integrity with respect to the Planning Commission. I would propose that the entirety of section 1 of the Public Service Values handout we looked at, entitled Trustworthiness, be included as a separate section in the Articles of Procedure, and that together with the change to the virtual discussion with respect to the closed session be considered together at a future meeting.
Andy
If-
has
So the,
made a motion that we table this proposed amendment to the 2022 Rules of Procedure until we can additionally consider ethics addition to the Commission's rules. Is there a second for that motion? I will second it. Okay, Ms. Kay?
Just a comment, if I may.
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, if we're going to be discussing virtual meetings, et cetera, I think it's going to be important that we figure out the technical aspects around clarity in sound, because I have not been able to understand 80% of what was just discussed over the last 5 or 10 minutes. And I'm not sure how to go about doing that, John,
So
but maybe
we
the
can,
commission-
so I'll share this. The town has just yesterday made resources available to work towards upgrading our system here to allow us to virtually integrate our virtual meetings. And so that would include being able to do it holistically. Right now, it's kind of piecemeal based on our current setup and our current structure. So there are moments where sound may fade out based on the technology that we have today. So that is in the works, where we're working with a vendor to upgrade our system to allow our meetings to occur virtually. Based on today, if there's, what I would recommend moving forward, if there's a question that you cannot hear, you can just raise your hand and I'll repeat that. If you can hear me clearly, I'm not sure why you can hear me clearly, but if there's a question that needs to be repeated, from moving forward, I'll just repeat what's been said from anyone coming from the dais so that we can move the meeting kind of efficiently. Right now, Mr. Capelli just made a motion to table the proposed Rules of Procedure amendment that public service values that was shared during our training, some elements of that be incorporated into our Rules of Procedure. And so that motion was made to table and for this to be reworked to include language that reflects ethics as part of the Rules of Procedure. Now, was there a second to that?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, there was a second to that. So right now it's up for an opportunity for discussion.
Yeah, I have some discussion on that. And again, I couldn't quite hear everything that was said, but it sounded like there was a recommendation that there's some additional things in the rules and procedures that Mr. Capelli thinks should be looked at. And I have no problem with looking at them in the future, but I don't see why that would forestall us approving these amendments now. I don't see why that is in conflict. You know, that we can still in the future look at the rules and procedures, and if there are other things that need to be changed, we can do that. But I don't see why we can't go ahead with this amendment right now.
Thank you.
I agree.
Okay, Michael, thank you. Any other comments?
I'll just respond only because there's an unnecessary rush, if you will, to do one and not the other. I'd like to have council look at the proposed inclusion of the principles in the rules, make one adjustment and not two. We're talking about at best a month, maybe. The fact that we're doing virtual, we're doing voting, we're doing everything that's in here except for possibility executive session, which may or may not be in our future within the next 3 months, maybe more. I don't see any rush to having staff or anyone else rush through this thing twice just for the sake of getting it done in piecemeal.
So if you guys were unable to hear Mr. Capelli, his position was that and opposed to piecemealing it today and at future meetings, waiting to do it at one time. And so that was his comments.
I'd also like to have council have the opportunity to focus on it. The entire council look at a draft and get an opportunity to see it before we go ahead with it. The Section 7, which most, I guess, now agree is necessary, as opposed to the reference to Robert's rules, which govern the exact language in 7. I have no reason to request, but it might give us some time to focus on the need to really include Section 7 and duplicate what's already covered in Article 3.
Well, what I would recommend then is, if the commission feels generally comfortable with the language as a proposed amendment exists today, then staff, we can work on framing the code of conduct sort of pieces that were alluded to, and we can bring that next month or at a future date. But if you are generally comfortable with what's existing today, we can go ahead and move forward with that, and then I can craft to include our liaison from council to kind of work through language for the additional considerations.
Go to the table motion?
You've already done that, Andy. And any other comments on Andy's motion to table Section 7 and 8, this proposed amendment? Okay. Hearing none, all those in favor of tabling the proposed 2022 rules and procedures, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Nay.
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 Well, I guess the ayes have it, but we can take a roll call vote. Petra?
Mr. Pearson?
Aye.
Dr. Longenfeld? Dr. Michael?
Nay.
Mr. Dowdy? Mr. Capelli?
Aye.
Mr. Iwan?
Aye.
Ms. Kay?
No.
Ms. Hennessy?
No.
Okay. Well, this amendment has been tabled, so. Second item of new business deals with a zoning ordinance text amendment to permit Mr. Taylor in limited circumstances to approve requests for generator stands in the setback of homes. Currently, these all have to go to the BZA, and John, we previously did this for HVAC units, and I believe you have the same sort of thought in mind. If you could go walk us through it, John.
Yes. Today before you for consideration is a staff recommendation to, the primary focus is to allow some administrative relief. We have received an increase in the amount of generator requests on the island. And are you able to see my slides, those who are virtually attending?
Yes.
Okay.
John, in the interest of time, I would like to make a motion to table this agenda item. And because honestly, at least speaking for me, I cannot follow this conversation. It's senseless. I don't see any willingness from the commissioners in the town hall to accommodate. So there's no way for me to make a meaningful discussion and decision. So I would like to table this topic for the next meeting, when we hopefully have equipment in place that allows us to have a decent conversation, discussion, and decision-making process.
Okay. It's been moved that we table this amendment request. Is there a second?
I second it.
Mr. Iwan seconds it. Any comments on this at this time? Hearing none. All those in favor of tabling the text amendment request, please say aye.
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 Opposed? Okay, it's tabled. Correspondence and staff comments. John?
The only correspondence I would say, you've heard about the update of Marsh Management Plan, and I've sent out the notifications regarding our training sessions. Based on today's conversation, I will work with the commission to identify language for the table agenda items and work with our in-house staff to ensure that we can have a meeting with great dialogue. So I'll keep my comments fairly brief there.
Council Liaison John Mofford is not here today. There are no members of the public here today. Commissioner comments. Joanne, we'll start with you. Madeline, any comments?
No.
Michael, any comments?
I'm sorry, what was the question?
Any comments for the record from you as a commissioner? We're item 10, X.
Do you have any commissioner comments?
Michael.
No, thank you.
Okay. Bill?
No.
Larry?
Nope.
Andy?
I'm afraid I do. Just on the last issue, John, if you have an opportunity, would you just take a look in the zoning and planning law, section 523-370? And one of the questions I will have at the next time we discuss this is, if in fact I'm reading it right, it seems like the BZA has the authority and they are the ones who control it, and it can't be changed unless BZA has a public hearing and it's ultimately approved. So if I'm right, then we wouldn't have the authority to move on that today anyway, but we'll leave that for the next hearing.
What are you referring to?
Sorry?
Which are you referring to? We don't have the right to move on
The
what?
planning law.
The generator stands. He's referring to the generator stands.
Yeah, with respect to the generators. 523-570.
Okay. Is that it, Andy?
No, I really want to make a comment that it troubles me to make, and it troubles me in the sense that in the 22 years we've been on this island, I have never seen or heard such vitriolic comments coming from the public about anybody in volunteer positions or elected positions with respect to management of the town or KICA. If you look at some of the website language, it really comes very close, if not subject to litigation on the part of either commissioners, members of boards, etc., for the accusations hurled by members of the public in their, quote, virtual comments online. It's sad. It really is. People are here, and as we know, we're serving based on the best information we can get, making decisions independent of particular views of any one of us, and yet people who have absolutely no care or knowledge of the specific issue make their points made, make their views made in points which are not only impugning the integrity of the commission or of the individual members, but it really, from the standpoint of Kiowa Island, is totally out of place here on Kiowa. This is a community where we all want to subscribe to a pleasant and an enjoyable life situation, and we don't need backstabbing going on because one person has a particular point of view or they hold a particular interest in something or somebody and they're not getting their way. It's really disturbing, and I see it throughout the island on a number of issues, not just planning commission issues, but to the extent any one of us have an opportunity to deal with people or views that would basically conform to what I'm saying, please take every opportunity you can to make your voice heard, and make your voice heard that this is not a community where because someone voices a view that you disagree with, you have to attack those people or that view. It just doesn't fit here on Kiowa, and it doesn't, frankly, it doesn't fit anywhere, but it's something that unfortunately should not be allowed to go forward. It needs to stop. And that's all I'll say on that issue.
Thank you, Andy, for saying that. I have no comments at this time. I'll entertain a motion for adjournment.
So moved.
And a second.
Second.
Moved and seconded, we adjourn. All those in favor say aye. Aye. We stand adjourned.
Don, I'm sorry, could you repeat for us what the motion is?
Motion to adjourn.
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you.